So when I was originally planning this video, it was going to be about Last Jedi, and it was going to start off like still complaining about Last Jedi a year after it came out. God, you're pathetic. But then I was going to go into a point that I haven't really seen anyone else make. That it's basically the same movie as Thor Ragnarok, because they're both subversions of the previous entries in the franchise, and they're both more comedic than the others, or at least I think that's what Rian Johnson was going for, and they both have this big overarching theme about letting the past die. Kill it if you have to. Let your chaotic neutral brother blow up your home planet if you have to. But then I was going to talk about how Ragnarok is a lot better because Taika Waititi commits to the tone. The other themes that are presented in the movie actually have something to do with letting the past die, like colonialism and historical revisionism actually have something to do with the past, whereas, you know, Last Jedi's themes sometimes have nothing to do or even actively contradict the theme of letting the past die. Like, let the past die, but still don't question authority who are inherently tied to the past. And also, capitalism sucks, even though that has nothing to do with anything else that's going on, and Ryan never also wants to commit to any consistent characterization from the previous movies, and it's a lot. But I'm not gonna do that, because I learned the hard way that I really, really hate editing long video essay type videos with movies that I hate. And also, I just don't have the energy to get mad about Last Jedi at this point in my life. 2018's been a really bad year, and, you know, I don't really have the energy or the time or the wherewithal to get mad about Last Jedi, at least for longer than like 15 minutes. I think it's pretty telling that the only part of the Last Jedi script I got written was this. Also, I don't want to spend this video complaining about Rian Johnson. I think, much like nitpicking Last Jedi, that well is pretty dry at this point. To make a long rant short, do I think Rian Johnson has behaved arrogantly with little regard for his actors or the fans and has been so thin-skinned about criticism that he makes Taylor Swift look like a stable, rational human being? Yes, and this was also before Taylor Swift actually, stood up for the things she claimed to champion, so hey. I have more respect for Taylor Swift now than I did when I wrote this. Do I think Rian Johnson is an irredeemable monster who deserves to have death threats lobbed at him and to be blacklisted from the industry? Good God, no. After a year of Star Wars adjacent performers being ran off the internet by the loud and less desirable Star Wars fans, I don't ever want to contribute to that radioactive dumpster fire. Rian Johnson isn't horrifically incompetent, TLJ still looks nice and has good moments, I just think he handled criticism horribly and it made things even worse. Although Rian Johnson did steal my refrigerator. Weird flex, but okay. Yeah, that part is true. Ryan, I would really like my refrigerator back. I will issue an apology for all of the mean things I've said about you if you just give my fridge back. So, instead of getting mad about Last Jedi, I'm gonna talk about a Star Wars movie that I actually liked. So here we go. This is my defense of Solo, a Star Wars story. To be clear, I wanted to hate this movie. I had every reason to. I am maybe the world's biggest Harrison Ford stan. I am very protective of Han Solo as a character, and I followed every second of this movie's absolute dumpster fire of a production.
Harrison Ford, honey, I'm so sorry they did that to you! So I have confusion. So this is supposed to look like this, when this technically doesn't even really look like that, even though this really mostly just looks like this. Okay, Giznet.
But I walked out of that theater on that rainy Memorial Day weekend, and I thought, it was fine.
It was okay.
But after it bombed and seeing so many people dismiss it as this weak little cash grab of a film with absolutely no artistic integrity, and don't get me wrong, this movie is 100% a cash grab, but it does actually offer something to the greater Star Wars universe, I kind of just wanted to stick up for it a little, like, poor little Solo, this little black sheep of a child within the Star Wars franchise that did absolutely nothing to quell fan backlash over Last Jedi or remedy any of the complaints that Star Wars fans have had about new Lucasfilm. Like, Star Wars fans haven't been complaining about Lucasfilm since Lucasfilm became a thing. So here we are, talking about why I think Solo is actually a pretty good movie. IMHO. If we're doing this, and I mean doing this, I think I'm gonna have to get all feelsy. Trust me, this is gonna hurt me a lot more than it's gonna hurt you. So, Han Solo, this character who randomly swept me off my feet and caused me to invest a lot of time, money, and energy into an actor who leaves the house 3 times a year. I've had a hard time qualifying why Han Solo is so special to me, mostly because people see him as the original Peter Quill, which he isn't, because I hate Peter Quill so much. Because Peter Quill lacks a lot of the subtlety and nuance that Han had from the very beginning, which is fine. Peter Quill's character arc revolves around him being obnoxious, and even if it's not really my thing, I totally get what the writers were doing with him. But Han Solo is not suave and womanizing, at least not really. Han wants you to think he's cool and tough, and he uses this exterior as a way to not only protect his business as a smuggler, but also to protect himself. And he's a really good actor if you're not really paying close attention. However, he drops that facade so quickly time and time again throughout the original trilogy and The Force Awakens, revealing that he's actually a big ol' softy who has anxiety and trust issues. And this is something I've been arguing for years now, ever since I got into Star Wars. It wasn't until they were dragging Harrison Ford into the promotion of this film to try and desperately save fan opinions that I actually got my confirmation. To quote Ron Howard, paraphrasing Harrison, he said that Han is always torn between the sense that he was, in a way, an orphan, and therefore both yearned for connection with people and struggled with it at the same time. I thought that was pretty interesting. And we see this tough, jaded, guarded Han all throughout the original trilogy, but we also see the cracks in the facade every time he puts himself in danger for his friends. Han wants you to think he's a cool, tough dude, and he is to an extent, but he's also a very fragile person with a lot of emotional baggage. Han just wants friends who like him for who he is, and he doesn't know how to make them because he's so afraid of being hurt, and I told you this was gonna hurt me a lot more than it was going to hurt you! Anyway. Solo just presents a much younger version of this Han who's a lot less experienced at hiding his emotions. So, moving out of the feels, I want to make a formal statement. I am sorry, Alden Ehrenreich. I am sorry that people gave you so much crap. I am sorry that this movie didn't do so hot in the box office, and I genuinely hope that it does not affect your career in any negative way, because you are a fantastic actor and a fantastic Han Solo, even if you look nothing like Harrison Ford. And don't get me wrong, Alden's Han is pretty different from Harrison's. He's coarser, a lot less dry, and somehow even more impulsive, but if anything, it's a younger portrayal of the same character. Both original trilogy Han and Solo Han share the same basic characteristics, they just present them very differently.
You found another one, but I am the better one, I won't let you forget me. I still see your shadows in my room, can't take back the love that I gave you.
Also, the obvious compliment is that Donald Glover as Lando is amazing. We knew that from the casting announcement, but it's easily the only part of this movie I was looking forward to, and he did not disappoint. Donald Glover could spit in a cup and they would put it in the Louvre. Solo isn't perfect, and I'm not gonna sell it as perfect, so I'll do a little bit of compliment sandwiching in order to mention some of the weaker points. The biggest problem with this movie is that it did have a little bit of a hellish production. I mean, they switched out directors halfway through filming, they had to bring in an acting coach at one point, and they seemed pretty married to that Memorial Day weekend deadline. I mean, I honestly think they could have benefited from pushing the production back a few months. They could have rewritten some stuff, they could have put a little more time into it, and they honestly probably could have benefited from the decline of fan vitriol over The Last Jedi. I mean, Solo only came out like a month or so after the home release press tour for TLJ ended.
Oh no. What would you do, motherfucker?
And it also came out after a few months of pretty much everyone in Star Wars being contractually obligated to defend Last Jedi within an inch of their lives, so people who didn't like Last Jedi were sick to death of hearing about Star Wars, and people who did like Last Jedi were sick to death of hearing people complain about Star Wars. It was a mess, and I think a December release would have benefited Solo, if for nothing else than a little extra time to polish up the final product. Because, yeah, it does feel like two different directors directed this movie. Not two different movies being played at the same time like in Last Jedi, but two different directors' takes on the same movie. Which does lead to some tonal problems, like some scenes are a lot goofier than maybe they should be, but at the end of the day, it's not any worse than the tone problems in Return of the Jedi, so technically it's not that big of a deal. Also, Solo does fall into the Rogue One trap of a lot of the characters being pretty forgettable. Like, outside of the original trilogy characters, I have a hard time remembering more than like 2 or 3 of them. Like, let's see, there's Han and Lando and Chewie and Kira and L3 and Pickett and Nest Lady and all the people who die after 15 minutes of screen time and Vision from the Avengers and Kira. Poor sweet Kira. I like the idea of her in theory, this foil to Han showing what he could have been had he fallen down a more morally ambiguous path, but she is so bland for 75% of the movie, and it's not like she didn't already have the toughest act to follow ever. It's hard to go from Spitfire rebellious space princess to nice but duplicitous lady. I also stand by my opinion that Kira would have been much more interesting as Han's sister rather than a love interest, if only so that she didn't have to compete quite so much with Leia. Emilia Clarke does fine, it's not a performance problem, she's just okay. In fact, this movie could have been full of foils to Han. Kira being Han but turned to the dark, Lando being Han but with a lot more self-control and a background of some privilege comparatively, Beckett being Han but never learning that some people are worth trusting. And it is, to an extent, but none of the new characters are expanded on very much. Again, it's the same as Rogue One. There are a lot of interesting ideas presented, but very few of them are actually followed through on. And this is a problem I've seen popping up more and more in the new Star Wars movies, and I want them to get back to that balance of world building and plot progression that the original trilogy had. Oh, and Darth Maul shows up. It's dumb. And I wish we could just let things be their own thing without sequel baiting them, or like Snoke is somebody from the old EU, or, you know, like, I like how we can bring Darth Maul and Phasma back from the dead a billion times, but not Han. It's a weird creative move, and I honestly think Disney did it to create yet another BS red herring for who Rey's potential mom could be. We already know it's Leia. Let me be in denial. There are other little nitpicky things I could complain about, like, why do Han and Kira have completely different accents when they're from the same place? Or the fact that this movie lacks a lot of the stakes that Rogue One or the main trilogy movies have, because, well, at least 3 of these people have to come out of here alive, and also Chewie is eating people. Don't like that. But back on the positive side of the sandwich, I really love how Solo explores Han and Chewie's relationship. Chewbacca has always been a little relegated to the sidelines as he doesn't speak a real language, so it was nice to see the little bonding moments between him and Han. Also, every scene with Lando and Han was great. And there are a lot of other little things I like, again, my Rey Solo heart loves all of the parallels between her and Han, and I also really like the duality that Han presents, like, He's in this place where he feels like he's a bad person, and he wants to weaponize that in order to, you know, protect himself in his very, very fragile emotional state, but Kira immediately calls him out on that. Like, come on, man. You are nice men. And I like L3. I think she's cute, if a little much. She was funnier than Luke eating the lightsaber, anyway. Also, this completely destroyed Womanizer Han Solo, and I am so here for it. He waited 3 years for Kira. I love a dedicated boyfriend. And in the end, that's what I really ended up enjoying about Solo. The characterization, especially for Han, was so nice. All of the original trilogy characters were fleshed out further from the original trilogy, and we actually got a couple of interesting new characters, even if they didn't reach their full potential. A lot of my enjoyment of a Star Wars movie is contingent on the characters being likable and someone you want to see succeed. And I think Alden's Han was genuinely sweet and charming, if a little bit of a tryhard, but he's supposed to be like, what, 19 here? I'm 19 now, and I know that I try way too hard, so it's a mood. And I think that's what makes me so defensive of Solo and Han as a character in general. He's a mood. And when you find a character who makes you feel good about your own emotional problems, you cling to them and never let them go. Which is why Han is still alive. Right, JJ? So we're probably not gonna get another Solo movie. But if we did, I would be okay with it. Just keep Ron Howard on as director, keep Jonathan Kasdan as the writer, and I think it would turn out okay. It wouldn't be perfect by any means, but then again, I don't necessarily think I would want for it to be. Star Wars movies aren't necessarily meant to be perfect. They're flawed but fun, and that's kind of what makes them so enjoyable. Which makes me kind of want to rethink my dislike for Last Jedi. Nah, Last Jedi wasn't fun. Oh, it still sucks. But Solo is good, and I'd much rather focus on it.
Wonder why Gambino got the game, half-time thingy, all she wanna do is bang, got a head.
So, like, I thought it would be funny if, like, when I was doing the whole, like, I'm the lone defender of Solo or whatever bit, I just, like, hit myself in the